Good morning, everyone. Welcome to, honestly, a kind of dreary Wednesday morning here in the Northeast. Hope wherever you're listening to the Call Sheet podcast, the weather's a little bit nicer for you. Looks like the skies are pretty determined to rain down on us today, but that's fine. That's fine. Great opportunity for us, man, to maybe get on a treadmill, maybe ride your exercise bike, do a little work around the house, and tune into the podcast here at the Call Sheet. It is our Whiteboard Wednesday show. Usually I have Coach Frank Lasasso with me, but I'm going alone today to talk about a great subject. A great subject. We're going to talk about quarterback processing. What does it mean to process as a quarterback? Why is it so important? Why does the ability of a quarterback to process incredibly intricate amounts of information in unbelievably quick real time separate those who can move from one level of football to another, and then at the highest level separate the good from the bad, the great from the good? Processing. And the reason we come to this topic today is because of an analysis I was watching on the NFL Network yesterday, where a couple of the analysts were breaking down the debut of Shedeur Sanders with the Browns. No fifth-round pick in NFL history, at least that I can remember, has come into the league with more scrutiny and with more strong opinions about that player than Shedeur Sanders. And the reasons are obvious. We don't need to reiterate all of them here. He is a high-profile father. He put up big numbers in his college career, helped turn around two different programs while in college, came with obviously a lot of hype, was talked about as potentially a top 3 pick in last spring's NFL draft, tumbled all the way to the 5th round. And then, of course, that created a side conversation. Well, why did he tumble? Was he overrated? Was he blackballed in some way? Did NFL executives and organizations harbor a grudge against his father or simply not want to deal with his father? Was there some sort of conspiracy designed to keep Shedeur Sanders out of the league? And most of that talk was still alive up until last weekend when Shedeur Sanders actually had to play. And in his debut with the Browns, it wasn't pretty. He went 4 for 16, 40-some yards passing, threw an interception, and simply looked overmatched. And if he looked overmatched, it's probably because he was. Head coach Kevin Stefanski had said all along, since the time the Browns drafted him, that he was a developmental quarterback, that there were reasons why he slid to the 5th round, that he really needed to learn to play the game at the NFL level. And in particular, and I never heard Coach Stefanski say this directly, but an awful lot of analysts who, when they talked about, well, why? Why does Shedeur Sanders need a so-called red shirt year? Why does he need to catch up? And it was because of his ability or lack thereof to process information at an elite level, which is interesting because that's something that, so-called draft expert Mel Kiper had alluded to as one of Shedeur Sanders' strengths. Oh, that he processed information really well. But what we found out was that throughout his college career, he had often been shielded from having to make the processing decisions that NFL quarterbacks are required to make. In essence, the system in which he had played had really shielded him from some of his weaknesses. And that processing information at a high level was going to be a challenge for him. So Shedeur Sanders, the plan was, let it be a redshirt year. When the Browns drafted him, they had 4 quarterbacks. They had Kenny Pickett, they had signed Joe Flacco, they drafted Dylan Gabriel, and of course they had Sanders, and he wasn't expected to see the field. But that's not how it played out, obviously. Pickett got traded. Eventually, Flacco got traded. Gabriel became the 1. Sanders became the 2. And then last weekend, Gabriel got hurt. Shedeur Sanders pressed into action. And again, didn't go well. And it really kind of, for anybody who may have been a conspiracy theorist, this guy is a number 1 pick and the league is keeping him down. Well, the results showed that's not it. That's not it. I mean, this is just a young man who's not ready to be a starting NFL quarterback, and he's going to need time to develop. And in particular, he's going to have to learn to process better. So, all right, what does that mean? If we talk about, hey, he's got to learn how to process better. I mean, football requires the quick processing of information at many positions. You think about linebackers and safeties. I played safety in college. It was an unbelievably fast game, even at the Division III level, where from the moment the ball was snapped, I mean, actually, your processing began earlier. It began when the offense broke the huddle, and you had information to process right away in terms of how of their alignment. You know, what formation were they in? What tendencies did that allude to? Communicating coverage and coverage checks to your fellow defensive backs. When they went into motion or they shifted the formation, you now had a whole other set of information that you had to process and then relay throughout the defense. Then the ball gets snapped and you've got read keys and you've got zone drops and responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. It's an amazing amount of processing of information. However, no position takes on a bigger cognitive load than quarterbacks. I mean, quarterbacks make decisions every play because they have to recognize what the defense is doing. They make pre-snap decisions. They make post-snap decisions. Often they have to quickly adjust plays at the line based upon their film study. The ability of you to store massive amounts of information in your head and then access that information in real time, oftentimes within split seconds, is one of the most valuable traits that you can have as a quarterback. Your ability to rapidly and efficiently process information as a quarterback is paramount. I mean, you have to fluidly recognize and diagnose the dynamics of a defense, both while it's static and then particularly while it is fluid. That is hard. You know, when psychologists talk about processing speed, they'll talk to the fluency with which the brain can take in and interpret information. Again, you have to recognize defensive structures and then anticipate the player movements within those structures to identify where might the open areas in the field be. Based upon how the defense has lined up, based upon the pre-snap look I'm getting, how are they now going to move post-snap? And their movements will then reveal where I need to go with the football. And if I don't read that correctly, if my recognition or my anticipation of the movements of the defense is wrong, bad things happen. Watching the Steelers-Bengals game last Sunday, there was an example of that. Pittsburgh lined up in what looked like a 3-high defensive shell. It looked like cover 3. And they walked up one of their linebackers, one of their inside backers, into the A-gap. He looked like he was blitzing. It looked like what you were going to get was a 5-man rush with 2 flat defenders, a single linebacker sitting in the middle of the field, and a 3-deep zone. It looked like the middle of the field was going to be open. I mean, you only had one linebacker to sort of patrol most of the area between the numbers. And when quarterback Joe Flacco caught the snap and the Steelers brought 5, Flacco immediately directed his eyes to the middle of the field, in particular to a slant coming from his slot receiver. But what he didn't anticipate was that the Steelers were going to post-snap rotate out of a 3-high shell. They were going to rotate into a cover 2 look, and one of their defenders, who looked as though he'd be a deep defender, safety Kyle Duggar, actually dropped down to the second level and undercut that slant. In essence, that Kyle Duggar's processing of information, his ability to understand how the coverage would change post-snap and where Cincinnati's routes might be based upon the pre-snap look Pittsburgh had given. Hey, we're giving him a middle of the field closed look at the deep level, but only a single underneath defender in the middle of the field in particular, in the hook curl zone. That's where they're going to go with the football. And so when I rotate post-snap, I'm dropping down and looking to rob that inside breaking route. And that's exactly what Kyle Duggar did. And the Steelers got a good pass rush so that Joe Flacco didn't have a lot of time to sit back there and let his eyes tell him exactly how the coverage was changing. The rush was immediate, and so Flacco basically had to go with his pre-snap diagnosis of the situation. What is my brain telling me is going to happen after the snap based upon what I saw before the snap? And that pre-snap diagnosis told him, throw my slant, but Kyle Duggar was dropping down into it, and Joe Flacco hit Duggar right in the chest with his throw, and Duggar took it to the house for a pick 6 that helped Pittsburgh put that game away. When we talk about processing, that is exactly what we are talking about. Most quarterbacks have to get the football out from the time they receive the snap in under 3 seconds. 2.5 to 3 seconds is a normal amount of time from snap to throw. And so what has to happen in those 2.5 to 3 seconds? And again, I mean, imagine in real time. Again, think about how hard this is. Let's count it out in real time. Ready? Go. 1,001, 1,002, 1,000, boom, ball out. 1,001, 1,002, 1,000, ball out. That's how fast. And in that time, you've got 11 big, angry, fast, physical dudes on defense doing their best to get after you in some way, shape, or form. The pass rush is coming. The defensive look is changing. The routes are moving. Everything is fluid. I mean, how that requires the swift reaction times and the ability to process visual information rapidly is so important. In this respect, processing speed, man, it requires so much cognitive discipline. And honestly, it goes at who you are as a person. You have to be flexible in your ability to process this information. You can't be a rigid processor. There's a lot of quarterbacks throughout NFL history who have been drafted in the first round, drafted high, based upon this litany of physical attributes, their arm strength, their size, their athleticism. Guys who can throw the ball 70 yards, guys who run 4.5 in the 40. But a lot of them just don't make it at the NFL level. Why? Why do they bust? Oftentimes, it's because they lack strong decision-making skills. They struggle to process information quickly. They can't dissect these complicated defensive formations and movements in real time. You hear analysts say things like, oh, he holds the ball too long. What does that mean? He holds the ball too long. It means that he can't process quickly enough to get that ball out fast. That his pre and post snap processing could be one, could be both, is just not fast enough. Or that they, in that process, struggle with recognizing what they're seeing. The most famous example of that, the Sam Darnold quote, "I'm seeing ghosts," when Sam Darnold, as a rookie with the Jets, was famously caught on the sideline by an NFL Films camera, kind of talking to himself after a frustrating outing where he'd thrown a bad interception. "I'm seeing ghosts." What was Sam Darnold saying? He was saying, I can't trust what my eyes are seeing. I'm not processing well. I don't know where the defense is going to be. I think they're going to be here. They're not. I'm making decisions with what to do with the football based upon false information that my brain is telling me. I'm not processing well. Sam Darnold, a guy who was a first-round pick, highly touted coming out of USC, quickly looked like he'd be an NFL bust. Struggled so badly in New York, and then had to bounce around the league a few years with a few different teams before he kind of got it last year with Minnesota, and this year with Seattle having a fantastic season. What happened? Somewhere along the way, the game slowed down for Sam Darnold. He began to understand defenses better. He began to process better. It's not like his arm got stronger. It's not like he got faster. His physical skills didn't change at all. What has changed Sam Darnold's career? His mental evolution. Some of the best quarterbacks in the history of the game, when it comes to processing, are also some of the most famous and names that are in the discussion among the best of all time. We're talking about guys like Peyton Manning, who many have said may be the GOAT when it comes to processing information. There may be no greater quarterback in NFL history in terms of processing information than Peyton Manning. Tom Brady, Drew Brees, if you want to go back some, Dan Marino. And it's interesting, when you think about those names, Brady, Manning, Brees, Marino, Joe Montana, you can put him in there. None of those guys were athletic marvels. They're all limited physically in some way, shape, or form. Montana wasn't particularly big or fast. Brees is about 6 foot tall. That's it. Never had a cannon for an arm. Manning had cement feet. Couldn't move out of the pocket. Brady was a big, gangly kid who looked like he'd never touched a weight in his life. The draft day photograph of Tom Brady in his boxer shorts with his sloping shoulders and lack of any muscular definition. If you're looking at that picture, you'd be like, that guy's an accountant. You wouldn't say that guy's the greatest quarterback in NFL history. What has allowed for all of those individuals to become great NFL quarterbacks? Their ability to rapidly maintain massive amounts of information in their brain, access that in split-second instances, and only then can their physical attributes come into play. When you think about some of the quarterbacks who have been the biggest busts in NFL history, and I don't need to throw guys under the bus. You can access those names mentally. Their inability to do these things from a processing standpoint has often led to their downfall. Yeah, I can recall a couple of quarterbacks that I've coached at Ocean City High School who didn't have the physical skills to be able to move to the higher levels of football. Played a little college ball, but weren't able to do so at elite levels. Sometimes the physical limitations are enough. You don't have a big enough arm. You just aren't big or fast enough. But a young man named Ian Ungst comes to mind. Ian was our starting quarterback for one season. He backed up the all-time leading passer at Ocean City High School, Andrew Donahue, for 2 years. So his path to the starting quarterback position was blocked by one of the best quarterbacks to ever play at Ocean City. And so Ian only got 1 year as a starter. Didn't have a big arm. He was about 5'11" and 170 pounds. Not particularly fast. Didn't have a big arm. When he was a sophomore as a JV quarterback, I don't know if he could throw the ball more than 30 yards. He kind of shot-putted the ball a little bit. But he worked on his technique and his fundamentals. But where he really excelled was as a processor. He had incredible recall. He could process information incredibly fast. He could see a defense pre-snap, understand where it would be post-snap, and know exactly where to go with the football. His lack of arm strength, he compensated for that by being incredibly accurate and getting the ball out incredibly fast. If a receiver was going to be open in a tiny window, he could put it in that window. And he could get it into that window because he knew exactly where to go with the football. And so a quarterback with a much bigger arm, who could throw the ball much faster, who had much greater velocity, could get the ball from A to B much faster, but couldn't process information, couldn't make some of the throws Ian could. All the physical skills said he should be able to make those throws, but he would process too slowly, and that window, that little window that might be open that Ian could get the ball into, it will have closed by the time that more quote-unquote superior athlete was ready to get it there. Ian, I'll never forget, took us to the playoffs in 2018. We went up to Highland High School, which was a really good program at that time, and played them in a downpour on a sloppy field. Nothing about that said passing game. And Ian threw for about 250 yards that night. He could barely grip the ball. He was literally shot putting it at times. And the wet track made it difficult for their D-backs to cover our wide receivers, but more importantly, because Ian knew exactly where he wanted to go with the football, he could compensate for the conditions. So whether it's at the high school level or all the way up to some of the greatest to have ever played the game, a quarterback's ability to rapidly access information and act upon it amidst the unbelievable chaos that is an NFL play, with about 2.5 seconds to catch the snap and make the decision as to where to go with the football. That divides quarterbacks in terms of their ability to succeed more than any other trait. And so when we think about Shedeur Sanders and his future in the NFL, or any quarterback in the NFL, we should start there. Not with how far can he throw the ball, not with is he 6'5", but can he process? All right, that's our Whiteboard Wednesday show. Join me on Friday. Pez will be back for the hot route. And now that the football season is winding down, at least here on the high school level, we're going to start bringing coaches back onto the show on Wednesdays. I'll still, of course, have Coach Lasasso with me. He always does a fantastic job. We're also going to reach out and begin hearing from coaches both locally here in South Jersey, and we're really reaching out to guys all across the country now. It's interesting. I've had the opportunity now to get in touch with some people throughout the country through this podcast, through my work at Fans First, and we're going to start broadening our reach in terms of the different guests we bring on. So, until Friday, hope everybody has a great day. Hang in there. The rain will clear out shortly. Take care.